Finance for the everyday millennial. Hard charging solutions. We provide an accelerant in the journey towards financial independence.
Welcome to Cassian with Cassian, the financial forum for young professionals. Today we're going to talk about, you guessed it, finance with my friend Reggie Pate. If you've ever wondered what it's like in the day in the life of a teacher, you're about to find out because Reggie's been doing this for a little minute. After graduating from Georgia Southern University Armstrong campus with a Bachelor's of Science in middle grades education, he served as a 7th and 8th grade math and social science teacher in Savannah, Georgia for 3 years before moving to Raleigh, North Carolina area to become a 6th through 8th grade lead math teacher. All of this while serving the nation as an aviation electrician's mate in the U.S. Naval Reserve. Today, Mr. Pate currently serves as middle school dean at Peak Charter Academy and is in pursuit of his Master's of Science in School Counseling. The thoughts, comments, and opinions that Mr. Reginald Pate is about to express do not reflect the opinions of Peak Charter Academy and are the sole responsibility of Reggie. Also, nothing discussed today should be taken as personalized investment advice. All right, now that we got all of that out of the way, I'd like to go ahead and start with the first question. How you doing today, man?
I am doing extremely well, man. How about you?
I am better than I deserve. Thank you for asking. So I want to go ahead and just jump right into it. For all of those aspiring teachers out there, or for the new teachers who are trying to figure out what a 20, 30, 40-year career in education might look like, can you kind of help us understand what your day-to-day looks like?
Sure. So as you mentioned a second ago, I have moved into the administration realm of the education field. So I'll take it from that perspective first, and then I'll kind of go back to where it looked like as far as a teacher concerned. On the administration side, it's really a lot of duty, to be quite honest. You kind of start the day with carpool duty, but most of the day is kind of taken up with your meetings, particularly with coaching sessions with your teachers. We have a thing at our school called O3s, which are one-on-ones with individual teachers where, if by chance they need any advice concerning curriculum or teaching strategies, that's when I really get a chance to kind of pour into my teachers. And the other parts of the day kind of are filled with either disciplinary problems, parent meetings, which essentially, even though your schedule seems to be fairly open during the day, things go by extremely quickly. So it's very fast paced, and really kind of keeps you on your toes as far as being able to problem solve, and try to make sure that you're efficient and effective with the decisions that you make, because essentially they, affect the entire school and your teachers as a whole. As far as the teacher side of it, it really, you spend a lot of time in your classroom. You really take time to really be conscious of pouring into your students, not only on the academic side, but also, me personally, I took the time to ensure that I was making good citizens, right? It's great that you're a brilliant math student. It's great that you're a brilliant writer. However, at the end of the day, we also want you to be morally sound. We want to ensure that at the end of the day, when you leave us, you're going to be not only a great academic student, but also a great person in society. So, planning periods, generally you teach 3 or 4 classes a day for 90 minutes. You do take time to have your lunch, but even as a teacher, it's very fast paced and there's very little to no downtime, to be honest.
Okay. I think it's so important that you talked about focusing on the scholastic achievements as a teacher, as well as modeling the personal and moral attributes that someone might have in order to create good Samaritans for society.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the main reason why people love teachers, because as kids, as students, we spend a majority of our time with our teachers. And so naturally, that kind of creates, in some sense, the person that we will become in society just based off of all the things that the teachers are pouring into the students outside of all of the information that they need to know, right? There are all those soft skills there. So that's really cool that you were intentional about that. Sometimes it's probably coming through unintentionally, but the
Yeah.
fact that you're intentional about it is awesome to hear. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to jump into the finance questions now.
Okay.
And my first question is, what has your personal financial education looked like? Have you had to seek it out personally? Were you provided any personal financial education in your formal education? What
Mhm.
did that look like?
Yeah. So, it has most certainly been a journey, to say the least. My financial education most certainly started at home with my parents. My mom specifically was extremely intentional about, helping us learn how to balance a checkbook and how to save money and how to, put money aside. Don't just spend whatever money you get on whatever toy or game you want, but be intentional about saving. So, that particular thing instilled in me the purpose of wanting to save money, wanting to think about my future as a whole. Obviously, as I got older, the one thing I will say, as a whole, without the exception of maybe class here or there in high school, there wasn't opportunities for me to learn anything about financial literacy. So it really wasn't until I graduated college where I started to look more into what does it really mean to save money? What does it really mean to have your money work for you? What does it mean to invest? And these are all things that I really kind of sought information out, either YouTube or people that I knew who were in the field for the most part. So I kind of started having conversations and really more research on my own than anything. But of course, over the years, I've kind of got in contact with some people, not only myself, but my family, to ensure that we're secure for our future. And even in that, still a learning process without a doubt.
Yeah, this is definitely a common thread. There are not a lot of formal opportunities being provided to a majority of professions.
Hmm.
I've interviewed several different professions, folks that are required to have a doctorate degree to practice, your attorneys, your medical professionals. They kind of get introduced to some financial education, and usually primarily geared toward just getting rid of their student loan debt. They're still not being introduced to investments and growth and wealth generation and things like that. So, yeah, I talked about it in another interview that I did with a financial advisor about how I kind of feel like it's intentional that we aren't being provided formal opportunities
Mhm.
included in our liberal arts education. And if you're going to get that master's degree included in that education,
Yeah.
but that's for another day. Uh,
Yeah.
I'll talk about that at another time. But you also mentioned YouTube University. Well, I think that is like super awesome. Our generation is maximizing, all the resources that are available to us today on the internet as we should. And I think this is a not so shameless plug opportunity for me to say that we do have several YouTube channels where our goal is to increase the financial literacy and IQ of everyone that we meet. So if you're watching this right now on the Cash with Cassian YouTube channel, or if you're listening to it on our podcast, please be sure to check out our RINO Invest channel, where we talk about a whole host of different topics to increase the financial literacy and IQ of our audience. So thank you for that. The next thing I want to ask is, um, what, how would you rate the personal financial education that you have received in terms of being sufficient in your mind to get you to where you want to go? So have you spoken to a financial advisor or a financial planner about your long-term goals? What does the Pate household look like in retirement? You want to retire in your 60s, or maybe you want to retire earlier in your 50s, and you feel comfortable about the path that you're on to get there.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I would most certainly say that it's adequate. Um,
Okay.
I wouldn't even call it sufficient. We most certainly are in contact with the financial advisor who has given us some advice on, what to do next, how to move concerning our funds and our money at the moment. And even with that, you take the advice, and then of course you move how you need to, right? So as of right now, we have obviously our retirement plan already encased, such as a 401k that is attached to where I'm working at currently. But another thing that was mentioned to me specifically was about life insurance, which was something I had absolutely no idea about. But that could be another conversation. But even understanding and knowing the different avenues in which you can go with your money, not only for protection for your family, but also protection for your wealth over time. So, as I mentioned before, we are in contact with a financial advisor, and they most certainly are pushing us in the right direction at the moment, but still learning.
Okay. So at the top of this question, you mentioned it's adequate, not sufficient. And I have found this to be the case with most people who work with financial advisors. We actually have a YouTube video explaining the difference between a financial advisor and a financial planner in our definition. And what we've noticed is financial advisors really just focused on providing advice for investments. And you find that a lot of them are insurance salesmen. So you also talked about that. I have some pretty strong opinions about insurance that I will talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I think being a financial advisor, especially for a bigger firm where you're just an individual or a registered representative, right? It doesn't really lend to being the best teacher of financial literacy and IQ, which is why I decided to start RINO Invest, because our entire goal is to spread the gospel of financial literacy and increase the financial IQ of everyone that we meet, which is why we created something called Club RINO Plus. So if someone were to subscribe to Club RINO Plus, they're going to have access to 4 courses of 4 hours worth of self-paced content focused on real estate investment, focused on starting a business, focused on our approach to investing in securities or the stock market, and a course called Entrepreneurial Personal Finance. It teaches people how to look at their personal finances like an entrepreneur would. So it's our personal finance 101 course. And the reason why it's so important is because once you have a client that's more educated, they're able to ask more poignant questions, more critical questions. And then as a planner, I'm able to provide even better planning services to that client, because now I know more precisely what it is that they're looking for. And then I can kind of steer the situation or the conversation in the appropriate direction.
Yeah.
Another kind of thing that I want to point out here is that, and let me know if this is the case with you, they talked a lot about, all right, this is what you need to be doing on the investment side. This is what your 401k looks like. These are the options within your 401k. You can create an IRA to supplement the 401k if you're not getting enough match. And then you should probably have your own brokerage account where you are contributing to that as well. And then on the insurance side, they probably said something about, there's term life insurance, and that's great, but it's not enduring. It's not going to provide you with the amount of opportunities that you might be provided if you were to get a permanent or whole life insurance policy with a cash value account, which grows for a long time and it earns interest and all these other things. So without going down that rabbit hole, they focus on investments. Yeah. What's missing is the tax planning. How do we decrease your tax liability and make sure that you're investing in things that will allow you to decrease your tax liability? What they're probably missing is estate planning. I don't know if they went through trusts, wills, advanced medical directives, all those things that are involved in estate planning. Retirement planning, they probably covered a little bit, but it was more connected to if you invest X amount, then you'll have X balance at X age, which will allow you to retire based on the distributions that you'll be able to take. And then insurance planning. I don't know how adequate the insurance planning was if they did go whole life, because from our perspective, insurance is insurance. It's not an investment. And so we like to separate them intentionally and just tell people, if you're looking for life insurance, get term. If you're looking for automobile insurance, make sure you have the appropriate coverage, property insurance, all the different insurances you have to have, disability insurance, etc. And then we make sure that your investments are maximized as true investments in performance.
Sure.
So I said a lot there, but I want to kind of take this opportunity to ask, were all those other things discussed, the tax planning, the estate planning, all the different types of insurance that you have to have, in addition to the investment and retirement advice?
Yeah, so there were a few that were most certainly missed, without a doubt. The estate planning was certainly there. The tax planning, no, not at all. Didn't even mention that at all. So they covered the bulk of the things that you mentioned a second ago, but the tax for sure was not even mentioned in our conversations.
Okay. Do you think you could have benefited from hearing some advice on tax planning to decrease your liability, either by adjusting one or two things on your current return, which you may or may not have the opportunity to do just based on your profession, or by telling you, if you decide to invest in X thing, then you'll be able to take a deduction and offset it, your W-2 income? Do you think that would have been a little bit beneficial?
Almost certainly. I think I'm a fan of people being able to at least see everything in front of them. And then of course, moving into whatever the decision making is, it's not appropriate to make a decision sometimes without all the information, right? So if everything was at least allotted to me, then of course I think benefits would most certainly be gained without a doubt.
Very cool. We are gonna move on, and I'm gonna kind of jump back into the profession side and ask you, what do you most and least look forward to about your job?
Oh man.
Sure, and as an administrator.
Got you. So I most certainly would say, as a teacher, I most look forward to being in the classroom with my students. Building particular relationships. I think in any given situation or profession, relationships are huge, and they are vital when it comes down to education. Regardless of if your students are the most well-behaved or not the most well-behaved, the second that you have proven to them that they can trust you, that you're there for them, that you love them, they'll do anything for you. So that was most certainly the best part about my job as a teacher. The worst part about my job was grading papers, to be quite honest. Just to be 100% honest with you, man, grading papers took up way too much time. But I mean, it's a part of the job, right? It's a part of the job. As an administrator, I am kind of on the same line as teaching, but coaching my teachers is it's the best part about my job. Being able to see them grow and to push them to a point where they are on the next level to move into the next seat, going from teacher to now teacher lead, from teacher lead to administrator. Just growing people is the best part about my job now. And sad to say, the worst part about my job is probably having to deal with disgruntled parents. So I'll leave it at that. That's it.
I feel like there's so much there.
Oh, there is. There most certainly is.
I feel like there's so much there. I feel like I'd be doing the audience a disservice by not asking a follow-up and asking you to kind of at least give us some example of something that may or may not have happened. It could be a hypothetical.
Okay.
Right? I'm winking right now for those listening on the podcast. of a disgruntled parent situation that you've had to deal with.
Got you. So hypothetically speaking, we'll say dealing with students, parents that do not want to see eye to eye with you, even with factual knowledge or factual statements, right? Um, so, one thing I will say is we do a really good job of making sure that we've done our due diligence before we even go into talking to parents concerning issues or situations. And the fact that even with all of the statements, all of the facts right in front of their faces, there's still an argument of this can't be my child. I mean, even to the point of video evidence, there's still denial. So, yeah, that is most certainly a struggle of my profession and in my seat, but hopefully that is suffice for an example for you.
That's hilarious, ma'am. Little Timmy decided to get a bucket of paint, a bucket of red paint, and just go like this and just smear the walls with red paint. Like, we have it on camera. As you can see, your son still has said paint on his hands. Oh, that's not my baby.
Couldn't be my child. Couldn't be. No.
That's funny. Okay. Thank you for sharing that hypothetical.
Very much so.
Okay, so I want to share some data and statistics. Okay. So according to a Bloomberg article written in September of 2021, the average salary for a teacher is somewhere around $62,000 a year nationwide and across the experience spectrum, and the average student loan debt is $59,000 according to the same article. If we look at the salary for an assistant principal of a middle school, then that number moves to $93,000 nationally and $90,000 in the Raleigh, North Carolina area where you live. We've linked both of these sources in the description of this episode for those looking to see where we get our information. Do these numbers resonate with you at all? And did you know statistics like this before you decided to go down the educational path?
So the numbers resonate to an extent. I think both of them are on the side of having been in the profession for some time, both teacher as well as administrator. The fact that it's 62 nationwide is beyond me, to be quite honest. Thinking about where I started at my first year in Savannah. However, the one thing about education is the more degrees you get, the more time you spend, the higher you're paid. So, you do have to put in the work and the time for sure in order for you to get to that next level. As far as administration, I would say the same thing. Student loans, I would say at this point, that's fairly spot on. It also depends on, of course, where you go to school at, because your semester payment is obviously going to be higher and lower based off of the school, without a doubt. Yeah, I was also very much aware of what the pay would look like going into the profession. And I think that's one thing that really determines people who really are going into education for the right reason versus those who are going to get a paycheck. Now, of course, those two, they do overlap from time to time. But you also see a lot of people who really take the time and really care for the kids, and the pay is something that they just happen to get. So, everyone is different, but the struggle is real sometimes for educators out here.
Yes, it is. We love our educators. I feel like that's the most commonly used phrase of most politicians. We love our educators. Okay, well, can we pay them a little bit more? Well, I think love is enough. I think we should, there are other things more important than money. No, we cannot pay them more. I just think it's a crying shame, the amount of stuff that teachers do and contribute to society. Everybody says, rightfully so, that children are the future. That just logically makes sense. So we should probably invest in our future by investing in our educators a little bit more. I don't know. I'd be interested in not just pay increases, but maybe benefits to make the job a little bit more intense, I suppose. Which is why, and we're going to talk about a little bit later, some of the employee benefits that are enjoyed by folks in your profession are specifically geared toward your profession. So we'll talk about that a little bit later to see if that kind of makes up for the lack in pay, at least when you're a new teacher.
Yeah.
You mentioned that these numbers may have been on the higher side. It's probably being skewed by California and New York type states and cities and things like that. And also it includes the experience spectrum.
Yeah.
But with you moving from brand new teacher to a lead to now an administrator, how much of that decision and path and progression is due to the fact that you're making more money as an administrator than as a teacher, I'm assuming?
Yeah. So I'd say, I don't know if money had anything to do with it, to be quite honest. I think me personally, I had gotten to a point where I knew that I could do my job very well in the classroom. I had the students, I had the scores, when it came down to end of grade assessments and all that good stuff. And I had even gone from grade to grade, right? Because, I'm a person who I like a challenge, right? So I was in 6th grade for some time. I felt like I mastered that. Then I moved to 7th, then I moved to 8th. And honestly, I had kind of gotten to a point where, what's the next thing, right? The next thing when it comes down to the education field is either getting out of the classroom as an administrator or a counselor or, a curriculum and instruction coach. And administration and the curriculum and instruction coach were the two jobs that were kind of on the table for me at the moment. And it just so happened that the administrator job is the one that presented itself first. So it was like, okay, let's move on to the next challenge. Most certainly the money was great, without a doubt. But I don't necessarily think that was one thing that was pushing me towards moving into that direction.
Okay. So I like that. It seems like you're moving there because you're passionate about the profession at large and your ability to make an impact at multiple different levels. And you have a level of ambition that I think is very healthy and necessary, and probably contagious. I imagine that all the folks that you're working with are probably looking at your path and saying, all right, this guy started here, now he's here. Let me see. This kind of looks like he's enjoying it. I might enjoy it too. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Now that you're in the seat you're in now as an assistant principal or dean, what are the next steps? Would you become a principal? And then after that, are you like assistant superintendent and superintendent? What does those next few steps look like?
Yeah. So my intent is to be as effective in the place that I'm in as possible. So I see what it now looks like. It's always interesting being on the outside looking in to a thing. And then when you get into it, you get a chance to see all of the small little, details that you're never privy to outside of that seat. So, being a principal is something that I think I would not mind doing. However, I think going into the principalship, I'm kind of detached from really having extreme impact on students and teachers, right? So in the setup that we have at the school that I'm at now, there are 3 deans that all essentially are almost principals of their particular portions of the school. So it's K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8. As a dean, I get a chance to coach my teachers, but most importantly, I still get a chance to influence my students. Sitting in the principal seat, that's still there, but there's so many more things that you're not responsible for as the principal, and that you're not in the vice principal seat. So I think my next step is to essentially continue and get this master's degree in counseling. And in that, it's a step up for me because now you are influential, not only for just a certain amount of grades, but now you have the ability to touch almost every student in the building, right? And then create, you know, community involvement. You're able to generate a lot of information and conversation concerning knowledge of being able to, you know, just step into those next realms that are, particularly in our community specifically, sometimes they're not aware of. So I think for me, that'll be my next step.
That is really cool, man, because you're able to look forward and see how you can continue to progress financially and make an impact, a bigger impact on students. But you're also cognizant of the fact that if you were to go the other path, the path that I thought administrators go down, principal, assistant, superintendent, secretary of education for the United States of America, if you go down that path, you're completely removed from all the things that you're actually passionate about. But that didn't deter you from continuing to look for opportunities to progress. And to hear that being a counselor is still progression, and you're still able to engage in the most passionate part of your job, which is impacting students' lives, that's awesome. And I think that's really a message for all the teachers out there who are like, man, I love teaching, I love my students, but what is the next step for me? But how can I maintain the impact that I'm having on my students? So I don't want to maintain this salary, but I do want to maintain this impact.
Yeah.
You should probably start looking for a master's in counseling and becoming a counselor and moving down that path as well. All right. That's really cool. Did you have anything to add to that for the young teachers out there or aspiring teachers before we move on?
I mean, more than anything, I would say just make sure that you know what you're doing it for, right? And keep the main thing the main thing. Even as you were mentioning a second ago, I think sometimes you get so lost in the progression of money, the progression of my salary increasing. And you eventually get out of the process of, hey, what was the main thing when I started this journey in education? So, you know, if I have any advice for anyone in the education field, is always to keep the main thing the main thing.
Do you keep dreaming about when you'll be able to pursue your passions? It can be challenging to turn that dream into reality while providing quality care to your patients, addressing your student loans, and living a comfortable life. I'm Cassian Nuñez, the CEO of RINO Invest, and I'm here to share a better way, the RINO way, which will make you financially independent sooner so that you can start to do more of what you are actually passionate about. Just to be clear, financial independence is achieved when your passive income exceeds your expenses, freeing you to pursue your passions, be it the ER job you love, helping your community through volunteer work, or becoming a world traveler. In other words, you are no longer trading your time for money to keep food on the table and pay your bills. So, what is the RINO way? It is the roadmap to achieving financial independence using the 4 guideposts of real education, investments in performing assets, no bad debt, and oversight of those assets. Our RINO account provides products and services as a pathway to achieving your goals at a pace you set and in an environment with other like-minded people, all focused on lighting a fire in their financial plan. Becoming a RINO will increase your financial IQ by making you familiar with the concept of risk and return, the different asset classes available for investment, and how you can take advantage of those options immediately. You'll have access to curated courses, online calculators, wealth guides, checklists, and your own net worth tracker. All this and more with your RINO account. So I invite you to take the first step towards realizing your goals by opening an account today. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to working with you.
So the next question, I love asking this question. I just love it. I don't know how much educational value there is, but there's a lot of entertainment value in this question. We've got some really awesome answers on this question. So the question is, what has been the most traumatic experience that you have had with money?
Oh man. Um, so my wife and I, um, whenever we first got married, we were we were down to Savannah. So we were walking on River Street, just hanging out, chilling, enjoying some time. And there was, I'm not going to mention their name, but there was a timeshare company that was on the river walk. And they was like, hey, you want a free vacation at Myrtle Beach, 3 days, 2 nights, all of that good stuff. And we're like, of course we want a free vacation. Right. So, what they don't tell you is you have to go and you have to sit in this meeting and you're there for hours upon hours upon hours. And they're talking about all of these great resorts, all of these places that you're going, so my point of view, I'm just like, I'm just here to get this free vacation and then I'm out of here. Right.
Yeah.
My wife she had a different plan, right? She had a different plan. So we go to the meeting. At the end, right after they give me the free food and all that good stuff, it's like down to business at the end of it. So there's somebody that comes out, they start talking to you about, hey, you should get this many points because then you can use them. You can go stay here for this many days and all that good stuff. So, I'm like, hey, all right, let's get out of here. I just want my free vacation. And then on the other side, I'm looking at my wife and she's like, like very interested in it. Okay. So before I know it, we're out of there. We are $7,000 in the hole because we had to take out a loan to get the initial deposit on a credit card. So now we're $7,000 in debt of credit card debt. Not to mention, right? We are fresh, newly married, right? So incomes, mind you, this is maybe year 2 for me teaching. So right? And then now we're talking about an extra monthly payment on top of rent, on top of car payments, on top of insurance to pay off this credit card that I wasn't even aware that I was taking out. So push come to shove, 9-10 months down the line, the account goes in the tanker. So now credit is ruined, and we're even in the process of thinking about moving to North Carolina at this time, right? So that in and of itself put us in a hole. And I was just like, all we had to do was say no. That's it. We went through this whole process. All we had to do was say no, and we could have been out with a free vacation and we would have no debt, none of that. But we just couldn't say no. So that is my traumatic experience.
That is so traumatic. Honestly, I'm feeling some type of way. I wasn't even there. We're several years removed from the situation. So much happened. But thank you for sharing that, because people who are listening to this, who are like, hey man, like I've been approached too, they were talking about this free vacation. I got an appointment, but I'm gonna get my 3 days. Look here. You think that you're strong enough to resist, but sometimes it's not just you in that room. Because I think they ask you, are you married? Are you the sole decision maker in the household? All these things so that they can make sure,
Yes.
that when they get you into that room and it's just you and them, that they know that you can make the decision to give them thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But also, I'm really sorry to hear that, man. That's a lot of money. That's a very expensive situation. Couple of questions here. Were you able to get rid of the timeshare? Do you still have the timeshare?
Timeshare's out of the door. We got rid of it.
Awesome.
Yes.
So many people struggle with getting rid of those things. It's good to hear that you got rid of it. And then the second question is, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but who is managing the finances now in the Pate household?
I will gladly say that I am the person who manages the money for sure.
All right. I didn't want to make any assumptions.
Yeah.
No, okay. No. All right. Cool. Next question. What are some of the employee benefits enjoyed by people in your industry? So we're talking, the retirement vehicle, 401k, public service loan forgiveness for teachers, healthcare benefits, time off for summers. What are some of the employee benefits that you guys enjoy in education?
Yeah, I think you hit quite a few of them right there. I know one of the things that I feel like is by far the most beneficial is the time off, to be quite honest. The amount of time and effort that is spent throughout one school year, the 2 months that are given, it's necessary in order for you to kind of recover, be refreshed, and even having like the breaks throughout the year. It's most certainly it's a great benefit just to get away. So retirement plans are kind of different. I know me personally in the school that I work at, we have 401ks. And it's interesting because I work for a charter school, which essentially is public. However, we don't necessarily work for the county. So county particular schools, they may have a different retirement plan, whereas we particularly have a 401k plan. My particular retirement plan matches half of what you give up to 6%. So, it's free money. So why not get it? And that's how I feel about it. But outside of that, of course, medical benefits. I think we probably have some of the best medical benefits as far as the plan. Of course, dental, eye, all that good stuff is available to you. And that's another thing that a lot of people sadly do not have is medical insurance. So, you can't go wrong being an educator because you're going to have it there for you. But yeah, and I mean, of course, as of now, based off of where we've been through post-COVID, there are a lot more benefits concerning mental health and being able to set appointments, with therapists, counselors, all that good stuff, free of charge. So I think more than anything, having your mental space is vital. So that's one of the benefits that I'm extremely appreciative of even now.
Awesome. So you mentioned a couple of things here that I kind of want to unpack.
Mhm.
The first is the match. Are we saying if you were to contribute 12%, they'd give you up to 6%, or is it if you contribute 6%, they give you 3%? Is the first one?
Well, I'm saying if you go up to 12%, they go up to 6. Yeah, but that's the cap.
That is that's awesome. That's free money right there. So does that mean that your floor then for your personal contributions is 12%, or do you have another plan where you're giving slightly less and then allocating the money elsewhere?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you can give up to however much you want, to be quite honest. But they will not go anywhere past 6. So yeah, the half cap for them is going to be 6%.
But I mean, in your specific situation, are you given, do you view it as I have to give that 12% so I can take advantage of the 6%? I don't know if you and your advisor talked about it, like you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, at least giving 12% here. We'll have you allocate the rest of your money someplace else, or there a conversation where it was like, we're going to have you contribute 10% so you could get 5, and then we'll put your money elsewhere. What did they?
I'm currently at the 10% piece, not quite at 12, only because of certain other financial things going on. So, you got to do what's best for you and your family at the moment. So that's yeah.
You got to live today. Bills are due today.
Indeed.
For your future, but bills are due today. Completely.
Yeah.
The second thing is, and a lot of people that aren't in this space may not be familiar. Even people who are in this space may not be familiar with the difference between a charter school and a more traditional public school. Because when I hear charter school, I still think of it being a public school that's just run a little bit differently. But you're saying a charter school is still a public school, but it's not tied to the county.
Yes.
So your benefits aren't 403B, 457 government sponsored plans. It's more like a private school, right? So is that something you knew, or is that something you found out before going to the charter school? Are different charter school situations different by state? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I was not really aware of charter schools at all when I lived in Georgia. Mainly because the only sectors that I was really aware of were private and public. Simple as that. When we moved to North Carolina, that's when I was exposed to the charter school realm, and it's extremely prevalent up here as compared to most other places, to be quite honest. I'd like to describe charter as the happy medium between the two. You still have to meet public school expectations, right? So the intergrade tests by the state, all of the state assessments you have to meet, even some of the requirements concerning food and health and all that. Obviously, you need to make sure that you meet all of that stuff. But the state requirements are still necessarily to be met. The only difference, I feel like, is you can add new things to your curriculum that you may not be able to in a normal public school. So for an example, at our school, we primarily focus on a separate curriculum alongside academics with moral focus. That's something that you can do with the charter school, maybe not with the public, and implement it as like a pillar for your school, right? So I think, and that's another part of it where I think a charter school is a public school with a private school feel. Everyone has an opportunity to get in because it's more of a lottery based. And then based off of that lottery, if you get in, you get in. If not, you go on a wait list. But it's a happy medium between the two.
So based on that, like every state should probably be adopting this type of a model. I really like your definition of it being a happy medium, and thinking about it in political terms. Oh, we should make it all private and give people school vouchers so that they could go to a 100% private school. Or no, we need to invest in our public education and our public school teachers and making sure that there's a standard across the board that everyone must meet so that students are getting a quality education across the board. This is a very, very tough debate in the body politic, but based on what you're saying, it's got public school expectations, food, health, that makes sense, but the exam requirements are also there. So there's a standard, right, for charter schools too, to make sure that everybody is passing that exit exam. But it adds in some of the things that people love about private schools too, where you're able to add in additional programs and then use it. That school can use it as a pillar of its school, right? So if you wanted to start a financial literacy program where all of your middle schoolers are going to start learning about personal finances, right? You could do that, and then your charter school would be the #1 charter school for personal finance in the area or something like that.
Yes.
That's awesome. So, yeah, I mean, so I take it you're going to stay in the North Carolina area just to stay in a model like that, or you're probably not too keen on going back to a state that doesn't have a model like that, where you have to choose between public being public and private being private.
Yeah. Now, I will put a disclaimer out there.
Okay.
In our state, almost anyone can start a charter school if you have the funding and you have the backing of a board, right? So it matters who is running your school. It really does matter. Our company, it's called National Heritage Academies. We have had great success. It started in Michigan, but it also we have quite a few schools here in North Carolina. But I do want to put the disclaimer out there that it most certainly matters who is running your school, because it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about keeping the main thing the main thing. Some people just put schools up to put schools up, while other people put schools up to be influential and like really change the community that they're putting the school in. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. That is awesome. And all the aspiring teachers, current teachers out there in various states, I think now have a much better understanding. and then they can make a better, more informed decision off that. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to go to the next question. What are some of the barriers to entry for becoming a teacher and then becoming an administrator?
I don't know if there are any barriers, to be quite honest. There are plenty of jobs ready and available for anyone wanting to move into the education field. I think the only barrier probably would be interpersonal things. So patience, understanding how to be intentional with relationships, which I think is extremely vital in our education field. But to become a teacher, I don't know if there are very many barriers. And as far as an administrator, it is putting in the work and the amount of time that is necessary to get to that particular level. And of course, the extra schooling. A lot of people may not want to ever go back to school after they get that first degree. So that would be a barrier as well.
Is it possible to be a teacher without a bachelor's degree? Because when I talk to nurses, it's possible to be a certain type of nurse, like an LVN or an LPN without a BSN, but if you're an RN, you have to have that BS. And, their situation's different. Are you able to teach certain things without that bachelor's degree?
Yes. So the only difference between it is you have to have a degree in something in order for you to move into the classroom. So in North Carolina, we have a lateral entry program where you can have a degree in who knows what, but take classes to learn what it looks like to be an educator. So, you don't have to have a education degree to step into the classroom, but there must be some type of paper that says I went to school and got this bachelor's to join those programs.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. It's not dissimilar to the military. You can have a bachelor's degree in underwater basket weaving, but the military is going to give you the education that you need in order to do the job that they need you to do. So
that's it.
If you got a bachelor's degree in like history or in engineering or in something, but you wanted to go teach, I don't know, what's something that's completely unrelated? Literature, I guess.
Sure.
More focused on the hard sciences, and now you want to go and teach literature or something like that, or English. You still are able to be a teacher, and they will probably have you go and get a few extra credits to get a BS in education so that you can better understand curriculum planning and things.
Yep. Most certainly. It's interesting that you brought up the militaries because I feel like I took more financial classes in the military than I did anywhere else.
Well, that's an endorsement. That is an endorsement for the military. It's true that there are a lot of resources on the military side, and I think it's born out of all the mistakes that people in the military have made, and so they're like, there's a massive problem. There are folks that prey on people in the military because they know those people are receiving a guaranteed check, and they probably don't know what to do with it, so yeah, I do like that push on the military side. All right, next question. Actually, I think we kind of talked about this already. Help us understand what initially drove you to become a teacher. I don't know if you have anything to add, but you did talk a lot about that. Did you want me to ask that question so you could say something else, or we could jump right into the quiz?
No, I mean, I think I've kind of already did it. It's once again just influencing. Yeah.
All right. So this concludes the Q&A portion, and now we're gonna jump into my favorite segment. So you think you're smarter than a rhino? So I just want to point out the purpose of this quiz is to educate the audience on financial literacy. All right. I don't consider these to be opportunities to highlight what people don't know. It's more about giving folks a little bit more information about this financial literacy and IQ that they may have missed out on in formal and informal education opportunities. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into the questions. So the first question is, what are the 5 factors that make up the average credit score?
Oh man. So I'm gonna say payment, as far as like on-time payments. Amount of time that you've had an account open. Debt to income ratio. And I don't know the other 2. I'm not even gonna take a wild guess on the other 2. Maybe I got at least 1 out of the 5 right.
You got 2 so far.
Okay. No clue at the moment.
Inquiries, how many times you... Yeah, that's the one people usually forget. Inquiries, and then the kinds of credit. So have credit cards versus mortgages versus personal loans. And then utilization, you said debt to income. You met utilization. If you have $10,000 in your cumulative lines of credit, how much of that are you using?
Yeah.
And then payment history was correct, and length of history was correct. So those are all 5. Unfortunately, so you think you're smarter than a rhino is not horseshoes and hand grenades. So almost does not count. But for the listening audience, payment history, inquiries, utilization, length of history, and kinds of credit or types of credit are the 5 factors that make up a credit score. All right, let's brush that one off and move on to our next question. What is the average down payment that you are expected to make for your primary residence, for your home?
Okay. At least 10%.
Okay. So that is also not correct. The average is 20%. Because in order to avoid primary mortgage insurance, you have to put down 20%. There must be 20% equity in order to avoid that PMI for most conventional loans. You can put down less. You can put down 10%, but then you would have to pay PMI. So the average is about 20% down to avoid that PMI or that private mortgage insurance. Okay.
Unless
you have the VA.
Right.
Unless you have the VA home loan. That is accurate. All right. Question number 3. What is the earliest you can take out money from most retirement accounts without exceptions to avoid dealing with penalties? So when is the earliest you can take money out of your retirement account without exceptions in order to avoid dealing with penalties?
As in the amount of years?
What age?
Oh, what age? Cool. I'm going to say the most common answer I feel like at this point would probably be 65.
That's really close. It is 59.5.
Okay.
At 59.5, you could start to take distributions from your retirement accounts without that 10% tax penalty.
Gotcha.
Now we're talking about traditional accounts here. If you're making contributions to a Roth account, you are able to take out the amount that you contributed, so the principal amount, without penalty at any point. You are not able to take out all the growth from the principal without incurring a tax penalty, a 10% tax penalty. If you are under the age of 59.5, it can go down to 55 with exceptions. So medical exceptions, the purchase of a first home. There are some exceptions where it could come down to even lower than 55 in other situations. So yeah, but the answer is 59.5 without exceptions to avoid penalties on growth in a Roth IRA or any traditional account. All right, question number 4. Who is responsible for setting or creating fiscal policy, and who is responsible for monetary policy in the United States?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
Let's give it a guess.
No answer. Okay. So repeat the question again. Who is responsible for fiscal?
Yes.
And who is responsible of
monetary?
Monetary. It's a great question. I'm sure it has something to do with the Treasury. Maybe not though. Let's just take a guess and say the President of the United States. Why not?
For which one? Both or for?
Let's go with both of them.
Okay. So that is not correct. On the fiscal policy side, it's Congress. So when Congress passes an appropriation, that is fiscal policy. If they pass tax legislation, that's fiscal policy. And that's the government basically telling the economy what it thinks it needs to be more successful. So they pass Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts, for example, they're incentivizing or stimulating a certain type of activity within the economy. Congress is doing that by amending current tax policy or passing completely new tax policy, for example. So fiscal policy is Congress. Monetary policy is the Federal Reserve executing its dual mandate to achieve maximum employment while keeping inflation in check. So they do that by revising interest rates, which is what we're seeing right now. The Federal Reserve is consistently increasing interest rates in a contractionary policy. If they were to decrease interest rates, it would make it easier for people to go out and get loans. Money would be cheaper, and so that's an expansionary policy. The other way they execute their dual mandate to achieve maximum employment and keep inflation in check is by changing bank reserve requirements. So what that looks like is all of the banks in the United States have a reserve requirement, which means if you have $100 million in deposits across all of your different depositors, all of your clients at the bank, the Federal Reserve says you have to keep at least 10% of that, or $10 million in your account.
Yeah.
Oh, if you want to make it easier for people to get loans, you would decrease that requirement to 5%. So now you have even more money that you can give out in loans. If you want to take money out of the economy to slow it down because it's overheating, inflation's getting too high, then you would increase that reserve to 15%. So the banks have less money to loan out, which means it's harder for people to get loans, and that is contractionary. So those are two things that the Federal Reserve used to execute on their dual mandate. Quick recap. Fiscal policy is Congress and taxes. Monetary policy is the Federal Reserve and manipulating interest rates and that bank reserve requirement. But hey, President, I feel like you were kind of onto something when you said Treasury. You should have kept with that same thought process.
Listen, we should have just had some multiple choice questions, okay? Then I could have process of elimination. I could have put some of them out without a doubt.
That's true. That's true. Okay. We are going to move to the next question. What is the difference between being rich and being wealthy?
So when I think of the difference between rich and wealthy, I think of rich, money in the bank, got a lot of money just sitting. Wealthy, I think about your money working for you, longevity, and it's not just sitting in one place. It's in multiple places, consistently growing over time.
Okay, that's kind of close.
Okay,
I'm going to try to give you half credit. All right.
gotcha.
Way we define the difference between being rich and being wealthy is rich is measured in money and wealth is measured in time. So you could be rich if you make $250,000 a year, but you're not wealthy because you're still trading your time for that $250,000 a year, right? And if your expenses are in the ballpark of $250,000, you will continue to be trading your time for money to pay for your day-to-day living expenses. Versus being wealthy, you could make $50,000, but as long as you're making $50,000 a year passively, you can have 5 rental properties or 10 rental properties, however many rental properties, and after all of your expenses, they pay you $50,000 per year in profit, and then you only have $50,000 or less in expenses, you no longer have to trade your time for money to live. So that person would be considered wealthy. So rich is measured in money and wealth is measured in time.
It's a great definition.
And those are the types of definitions that we create at RINO Invest. So please go ahead and open a Club RINO Plus account. All right. And the last question, the best question, what does the RINO acronym stand for?
Oh man. Let me see. I don't know if I have a particular, let's say, reinventing education in neighborhoods overall. Of course, that's not the case at all. But I know it has something to do with educating and ensuring that, people, financial literacy is increasing without a doubt. I don't know what the individual letters mean, but I know that's the main purpose.
All right. I'm going to give you a 0.25% or 1/4 of a point credit. I'm going to give you a 1/4 of a point credit here. Your answer was reinventing education in neighborhoods overall. That was okay. All right. So the R is real education.
Okay.
That's where the 1/4 point is coming from. So there's a bunch of different opportunities out there for people to educate themselves the wrong way.
Yeah.
At RINO Invest, we prioritize education and real education, so applicable education. You can take one of our courses, hit the ground running all by yourself if you're a do-it-yourselfer with the information that we're providing and start executing it in your day-to-day life in order to get to that wealthy stage, right, where you're no longer having to trade your time for money.
For sure.
I is investments in performing assets. You have to know the difference between an asset and a performing asset. And the best example that I could give is your primary residence, where you live. Although that is considered an asset from an accounting perspective, because you probably have some equity built into your account, so it sits on your balance sheet as an asset contributing to your net worth, it is not performing because it is a use asset. So if you are using it, you have to pay the mortgage if you have one. You always have to pay insurances on the property and taxes on the property and maintenance of the property. So that's money coming out of your pocket. A performing asset would be an investment property where someone else is paying you to live there, and they're paying you enough to pay for all of those expenses and then something for you to keep in profit. So you got to know the difference between an asset and a performing asset. N is no bad debt. Getting rid of your timeshare debt is essential is essential, right? In your case specifically, but credit cards, student loans, personal loans, all that has to go. And the reason why we say bad debt is because not all debt is bad. There are instances in which debt could be good. For example, if you're using debt to purchase an investment property, if you're going to get a mortgage for $100,000 to buy a $150,000 home and you're renting that thing out for $1,500, that's plenty of money to pay the mortgage on the $100,000 loan and to pay the taxes and the insurance and the upkeep and all that stuff and pay you some money. So we would encourage people to take out those kinds of debts in performing assets. And then the O is oversight of those assets. And you can't have oversight unless you receive real education. Because if you go to your advisor and your current net worth is $500,000 and they tell you or remind you that the last time you came in, it was $450,000, you're like, oh man, my net worth grew by $50,000. That's great. But if you have a real education, you're going in expecting $550,000. You're expecting a $100,000 increase based on what you know, right? So now when you're told, hey, your net worth is $500,000, you're like, something's off, right? Because you know the questions to ask, you understand what the market has done since the last time you were in this person's office. And so now, those antennas are going up, like, why am I not at $550,000? So to effectively manage your investments, you have to have that real education.
Good.
So to recap, real education, investments and performing assets, no bad debt, and oversight of those assets is what RINO stands for. Thank you for your time, Mr. Pate. We really appreciate it. I hope you continue to do great things for your students. I know you will. I look forward to talking to you again. And thank you.
Good deal. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Until next time.
Take care.